Additionally, we got to pay very close attention to the risk of taxes moving higher. I know there's this narrative that taxes will stay the same and or go lower. We just feel that when you look at the tea leaves, that is not the base case for 10 to 20 years out from now, and we'll show you why. Before we talk about that, we really have to examine, though, what are the current tax rates versus what they were before they were changed in 2018. So that means several administrations actually had the tax rates here in green. And those administrations were George Bush, not senior, but George Bush, right? Uh, George W. Bush, right? And then you had um, Obama's presidency had these tax rates in green. Now, in 2018, when the Trump administration took over, they set a different tax rate, and that is what is trying to be extended because currently those are set to expire in 2026. So when these changes took place, it reduced a lot of those tax rates here, especially in the first four rungs. What it did was it really significantly expanded the joint married filing jointly income range, right? Where that almost encompasses $200,000 of income versus what it used to encompass only about 70 with a higher rate. So when we try to figure out, well, are we living in a lower tax regime than we were? The answer is very much so, yes. And in fact, we did a study using inflation rates, using tax rates going back to 1942 to determine how much would a $100,000 individual earner today and a $200,000 joint earner today look like in tax rates going back over the last 80 years. And unequivocally, there is no period besides a very brief period in the 1960s where this type of individual or joint couple would have actually paid a lower marginal tax rate. It just never has been as low and as low for this long of time in modern day history. And in fact, the average tax rate, if you would kind of look through all of this, has been around 26% really across the whole board right now on this group of individuals from 100 to 200 single and joint. We're paying around 22% marginal tax rate. That's a 4% difference. And 4% means a lot when the average savings account's only paying 4% or less, right? And I say less because that rate is about to move down over time as interest rates potentially move down. But who knows, right? Will interest rates move up or down? I don't think anyone has a crystal ball. I know that what the current administration wants to do, but I don't think that they have the ability to control that when that's really controlled by inflation uh, in the Federal Reserve, right? And what they're seeing with inflation. But the question that we really need to come down to is, do we firmly believe that tax rates are really going to move down in the future when our deficit and unfunded liabilities continue to go higher, right? When you look at the fact that 96% out of every US tax dollar comes from just four sources, which is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the interest on the national debt, I think to me, it is evident that tax rates will not be moving down in the future. In fact, your best bet is that they stay the same for the short term, right? But as soon as some of this kind of the political wind kind of blows out here and there's new administrations of the future, I think we will likely start seeing higher taxes because when you look at most developed countries across the world, right? These countries are approaching the 50% mark in terms of marginal tax rates on folks in terms of income, right? We're not even on the board here when you look at the developed world, specifically in Europe. And in fact, according to the Congressional Budget Office, tax rates would have to go from 24% basically in the middle rung all the way almost out to 50% to keep the US solvent and essentially reel in that national debt. Because right now, what we have is out of control debt. The servicing, the carrying of interest on that. Because remember, if we have debt, we owe that to other people, right? A lot of that includes domestic, but most of that is international borrowers. The US dollar was strong for so long, and we had many folks that were investors in the US debt market, specifically like countries like China, right, that would buy into our debt, right? And now we owe interest on that, and that interest has gone from 2% only 5 years ago per year up to ballooned up to almost 5% per year as interest rates had to go up to fight inflation. So it is a serious issue that is, if is not addressed, can lead to really difficult scenarios, economic scenarios for the US. So that's where our base case is that taxes aren't going anywhere, but potentially higher. And how we have to start thinking about is what's the strategy behind that?